Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first creativity camp from the Charter for Compassion. A charter is usually a document that's drawn up by a governing body or an institution for creating a company, a college or city that outlines its rights and privileges as defined by its charter. The Charter for Compassion is more than a document and more than an organization, it's a movement. Imagine if every interaction in the world took place in and from a framework of compassion. Compassion would be woven into everything we do, every conversation, every action, every encounter, and every decision we make. What kind of world would that be? The Charter for Compassion is international and began as an idea by scholar and author Karen Armstrong, who presented it in a TED Talk in 2008. She won the annual prize given by the TED organization to foster the development of that idea. So 10,000 people did exactly that. And now it represents about 9.5 million people around the world in 400 cities, 2,200 organizations in 54 countries. There are also 12 sectors. So in service to spreading compassion in the world, we're presenting a series of programs as resources for those who are having to shelter at home or quarantine because of the coronavirus emergency. We're featuring mostly arts partners, but other sectors too. We hope you will like and use the resources presented. And we invite you to join the Charter, which is free, by clicking on the Partner tab at thecharterforcompassion.org. So now we're going to talk about why we're here. Joining me is Julie Penshorn. Hi, Julie.
Hello.
Julie is in, are you in the Minneapolis area?
Just
Yeah. Yeah, I'm coming from Wisconsin, so we're practically neighbors.
Yes.
So Julie, besides her art as a children's author, Julie's a speaker, performer, musician, and horse trainer with a BA in psychology and a master's in business communication. And in her Smart Tools for Life work and empowerment programs for teachers and students and children, she synthesizes her passion for peace, equity, and a more harmonious world into everything she does in all her work. She's going to talk about stop signs today. So Julie, welcome to the Charter for Compassion Creativity Camp.
Well, it's really cool to be here. It's exciting.
So I think what I'm going to do, I'm really curious because I don't know how a woman who is a horse trainer then becomes an author and a musician and a performer. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that journey occurred.
Well, I think today is a very good day to be practicing what I preach because it's been very stressful around my horse barn, and I have been dealing with a lot, and so I'm very happy to have at least the opportunity to sit here and be reminded of my own work. Namely, stop and breathe. So there we go.
Okay.
And try to move on to being able to solve whatever problems are facing us. And in our families at home right now, people are facing a lot of problems, probably dealing with things that have been swept under the carpet for perhaps years, depending on how old the children are. But often there are ongoing conflicts between the parents or between the children and the parents. And when you're cooped up like this, suddenly things start rising to the surface. And so I thought it was a great time to talk about my children's books and to encourage parents and children to read them together. You asked about the particulars of how I got involved with working for peace as being a horse trainer. And when my son was young, I was mostly being a mom for a while and not much of a horse trainer. And during that time, I was just made acutely aware of how well, what I thought poor my skills were for parenting. I only have one child, so I only got one chance. And I feel like it would take several lifetimes to really perfect parenting, if you ever even could, because each child is, of course, so different. And that is very much like horses. Dealing with horses is similar to dealing with children. So the difference, a big difference is horses train each other with, kicks and bites and things that we typically do not want to use with our children. And so we have to be more creative than that. So a perfect place for creativity is in parenting. And it's a wonderful opportunity if you can allow yourself time to stop and breathe and think through to some deeper thoughts and some more sophisticated, or sometimes more simple ways of solving your problems.
Great.
Do you want me to continue?
So,
because I have more to
yeah,
say,
because it's fascinating to me how you go from being a horse trainer to an author, and you're also a musician, I understand.
Right. Well,
so you've written songs as well.
Yes. Part of the commitment that I have to the work with kids came actually from the opposite end of the age spectrum, my dad. He's got Alzheimer's and has had it for many years. And it's been really interesting to watch the progression of the disease with him, because it's only now, after having Alzheimer's for 13 years, that he has forgotten the words to songs. He through the past 10 years or so of having Alzheimer's, he couldn't remember my name, and he couldn't remember if it was a boat on the lake or a car. And he was seeing little guys and all that. But he could remember the words to every song he ever learned. And so that's why I wrote the books, 2 of them at least, in poetry, because I feel like it's memorable, just like songs. One of the main reasons you remember songs is because they rhyme. And you can think of, what's going to rhyme with that? Oh, yeah. And you don't have to think as hard about what the content is as you would, for example, memorizing the Gettysburg Address or something that doesn't rhyme. So my dad led me to songs and the rhyming, but also I would have to blame it on him too, because he was always the poetry writer in the family. So he kind of got me on the idea that there's a rhyme for that. And that just has been always fun for me.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Sounds like a fun dad. So would you like to read your book, Julie? You have a book called Barnyard Buddies. Would you like to read that for our audience?
I would love to.
Thank you.
So let's see if this is going to work out. Is there a way to make my picture a little bigger? That'll probably work perfectly. Okay. The Barnyard Buddies Stop for Peace. This book is illustrated by Jory Keith, and in the subsequent books, she calls herself Janine Johnny. She had a desire to change her name. So here you go. Meet the barnyard. I'll try to hold it level. The barnyard was peaceful. All were sunbathing. Then the rain came, and all but King were complaining. I can't fit under where the roof goes over, said the shivering goat, whose name was Clover. So they huddled together and stomped to keep warm. And the rain pelted down. It was quite a storm. The droplets smacked hard on their hair and their hides, and it hurt. And they grumbled, and their anger did rise. I'm mad at King. He stole the best spot, said Gray Donkey to Clover, Portland Pig, and Old Dot. And the others agreed, and their anger grew hot. Yes, King was under the barn roof, and they were not. They paced and they shook and they whined out loud. Then up spoke a peacemaker, Mrs. McLeod. She was their good friend, and she was so smart. She had a good head and a loving heart. She said, "Stop and breathe now. Breathe in and breathe out. And don't bite or kick or scream or shout. By breathing, breathe deep, you'll calm down. And then you can see some way to solve this, some way to agree." So they breathed and they blew as if cooling their tea. Now, tell how you feel. And they did, politely. "I feel angry when one gets it all." "Me too," exclaimed Pig. "Me too," said them all. King's ears were floppy. His head was down. "I feel lonely and hurt when my friends aren't around." "Well, open your minds, dears," said Mrs. McLeod. "Brainstorm ideas. Say them out loud." "I can be quicker to say what I need." "I can ask King to move over." "I can ask King to take turns." "They can tell me I'm taking all the space and ask me to move over." "I can crawl under King's legs." So they listened to each other as each politely spoke. Then King said, "Next time, just ask. Don't wait till you're soaked." Well, they liked that idea, and now they had a plan to make the change they wanted so this wouldn't happen again. King made room. He gracefully moved over with courtesy for old Dot, Gray Donkey, Pig, and Clover. They smiled and they got warm. They all could squeeze in, and they snuggled and cuddled and nestled again. Then, with a laugh and a delighted shout, "Hooray!" they all said. "We worked this problem out." The end. And what did they do? This is the process that they learned. STOP. Stop and breathe, tell how you feel, open your mind, and plan a deal. And I'll show you some motions for that. But I just wanted to also show you that at the end of the book, there's a parent and educator guide, which has lots of ideas for activities that you can do when you're stuck at home during this coronavirus stuff. And there is actually a mentor guide that an adult can guide youth to work with younger children. So maybe the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th year graders can go into the classrooms of the kindergarteners and the 1st and 2nd graders, and 3rd sometimes. This is the song at the end of the book, and it goes through that same exact process. And if you want to have the songs and children's dialogues, this CD goes with that book. And this is another one that goes with the second book that I'm going to show you, but they kind of go together really. So the story is stop and breathe. Tell how you feel. Let's see, feel. Then open your mind and plan a deal. Now, generally, I show people shaking hands like this for plan a deal, and then yay for celebrating because we succeeded. Now, during the coronavirus, we might have to do plan a deal with an elbow bump or something like a high five from a distance. But eventually, hopefully, we get back to being able to touch again, because it's hard for children during these times when we're not getting the closeness that we're used to. It's really, they figure that 20% of our kids are going to be traumatized by the COVID-19 situation because they haven't been able to play and interact with their friends. And that's a big part of socializing. So even if you have a wonderful family and you're doing everything right, your kids can still be traumatized right now. And I'm sorry to say that, that's bad, but it's fact. And boy, we're getting a sense of what it's like, because those who typically have privilege are shut up in their houses just as much as those who don't. And I think it's this COVID-19 is in some ways a great equalizer, although on the other hand, we're seeing such terrible devastation of the particularly Black and brown communities. It's just heartbreaking. Anyway, all the more reason to try to find wonderful resources to sit with your kids.
That's great, Julie. So I understand that you have animals that actually you use them as the characters in your book. Who is Dot, by the way?
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so how that whole story came about was I walked out to the barn one day and there was King, just an oblivious horse, just a big dude who really couldn't care less about anything else. Talk about privilege, right? So he stands underneath the lean-to just like, oh, everybody else is getting rained on, so who cares? Because horses don't necessarily say, gee, let me make room for you because I can see you're suffering. So I thought, you know, that is not an uncommon situation. There are a lot of people who just do not see the suffering of others. And that's why it's so cool to be here with the Charter for Compassion, because helping children and adults understand the role of compassion as a part of your lifestyle is critical. So whether it's making a compassionate city, a compassionate home, a compassionate school, or any of the other wonderful work that you do, it's really indispensable because there are a lot of kings out there. So I was looking at this horse thinking, good grief, I could really imagine a scenario where this could cause a lot of conflict with children. And that's what prompted the story. But you asked specifically about Old Dot. Well, in my barn, I do separate the male horses from the females, but this is Old Dot was modeled on a darling old horse I had whose name was Cajun. And I think you have that, a little video.
Oh yeah, we have a video we can show of Dot, the model for Dot, exactly. Right?
Yep.
I'm going to mute so he can bring that up.
Good for you. Hi, my name is Julie Penshorn. I write children's books and children's music that provide smart tools for life for young kids. This is Cajun. She's the model for Old Dot in my book, The Barnyard Buddies Stop for Peace. In this book, children see how to be smart with their anger when limited resources create conflict. You'll love seeing how the artist Jory Keith has portrayed these animals and all their emotions in her art. The music on the I Stop for Peace CD takes children through each step of the STOP process in song and short children's dialogues. Young children and their parents, grandparents, and other caregivers can learn a conflict resolution process driving to daycare or school. And the simple process is perfect for the classroom too. I want my way. Wouldn't it be great if everyone knew how to stop and breathe and then work out their real life problems?
I feel my way.
Why
you
not?
feel yours. How
Visit
can
us
I work
at
this out
smarttoolsforlife.com and get your
know.
copy of the book.
Stop for peace, we do not fight first. We know fighting makes us hurt worse. Stop for peace, we're smart when we see a way to work together peacefully. First we stop and slowly breathe.
So we've got to meet the horse that is Dot in your book.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful animal. I was curious about something you said when I looked through your materials. You said children are born into the light, and I happen to believe that too, but maybe you want to tell us what you meant by that.
Well, children, like horses, when they're born, let me talk just a little bit about horses. It's interesting because when baby foals come into the world, their mother licks them, and the more she licks them, the more well-adjusted those horses are and the less subject they are to stress. They've done research on rats and to some extent on horses about this. And it's very much the same with people. The more kindness and love and cuddling and being close to mom that they have, often the more capable they are of, so many things. So the age from birth to 2 is an area that I don't particularly get involved with in my books, but it is really critical. And I believe that there has been a lot of research done on whether or not babies are inherently kind, and it's quite fascinating. I promise I am working on a blog, and if you check my website shortly, I'll have a few links for you on that. Not like today. But when children are in the ages of 3 to 8 or 9, they have what's called the absorbent mind. And Maria Montessori, who I became a fan of hers because my mentor, Rebecca Jenke, was a Montessori teacher. And she and I worked together to found Growing Communities for Peace. She was my child's preschool teacher, and I just thought she was such a genius and knew so much. So I just wanted to hang around with her and learn more. Anyway, the absorbent mind is where and why the children's books are so important. Because if you think of children as just being sponges in this time period, and that's why what we put into the water, into the milieu, into their environment is so important, because they're just going to absorb it. They say conflict resolution styles are made by the age of 3, which is really depressing, because that means so much of the conflict resolution styles are just assimilated from what you've taught them interacting with your spouse, your partner, your other children, your friends. How much you scream when you hang up the phone, things like that. But that isn't a done deal. They're not doomed at the age of 3, even if we have been less than perfect, because we're all less than perfect. And so in the interest of showing some compassion to ourselves, we can get books and music and other tools to help our kids during that absorbent stage of 3 to 8, to help them find a natural nonviolent response, a natural ability to communicate, a natural willingness to share their feelings rather than follow perhaps in our own footsteps of knee-jerk reaction and forgetting to breathe and getting all stressed out. They can be better than we actually are. And that's why you go on Amazon and you Google children's books with moral messages, with character education, or for peace, or for conflict resolution, or anti-bullying. And that's why I agree with you. It's important. Did I answer your question?
Certainly did. We at the Charter, our definition pretty much of compassion is when you feel another suffering and then you act to do something about that. So it fits with that, what you just talked about. And I'm wondering, when you read this book to children or even the teachers, what kind of response do you get? I understand that don't children tell you, or parents tell you, I wish I'd had this as a child? I wish I had this tool as a child. Okay, tell us about that.
Well, I'll give you an example. We did a mentor program up here in Chisago County, or in the school district of Chisago, where the FFA, you might remember it more as the Future Farmers of America, but now they're called FFA group, has to do volunteer work. And so since I was friends with one of the teachers that guides the students that are in FFA, we thought it would be a great project to have the FFA students go into the kindergarten through second grade classrooms in the district and read the book. So we guided them through the mentor program at the back of the Barnyard Buddy Stop for Peace that I showed you earlier. And when we were working on that and practicing the book, several of the teens talked to us later and said, oh my gosh, I wish I'd had that when I was in kindergarten. I wish I had learned that when I was in school. It would have saved me so much trouble. And often the feedback that we get from teachers that do read this book to their students is, well, we have a different program for our fourth graders on up, but we really don't have much for our kindergarten through third graders. We use Olveus, or we use this, or we use that, but those early grades are harder to reach, and our tools aren't as broad, and we just don't have as many tools. So they liked this book because it dovetailed nicely in with the stuff that the older kids were doing. So it wasn't like they had to stop and learn things over.
So will you go through those 4 stages again for us, just to review it?
Like as in stop and breathe. Tell how you feel. Open your mind and plan a deal. Yay. I want to say something about the yay. If you remember back in the book we read, they were cheering and celebrating because they worked the problem out. Often we think of conflict as this downer, like, oh, groan, I'm in a conflict. I have this terrible feeling in my heart and I know it's never going to be the same between us. Instead of, okay, I really don't like this conflict, but now that we've gone through the steps and we've talked about our feelings, I feel so much more connected with you. I feel I understand you on a level I never understood you on before. I feel that our relationship has deepened so much. And because of that, that is really cause to celebrate. And so we encourage people to teach children these steps in this process, and then to let them use the process independently. One of the ways that teachers bless their hearts, because they have a terribly hard job, and especially today with so many children coming to school with adverse childhood experiences that just prevent them from learning as well as they can or could. At any rate, teachers have a lot of energy expended on keeping control of this classroom,
Yeah.
control of these maniacs that are running around driving them crazy. And what we have found is that when teachers use a more level approach, a more level playing field, and aren't as hierarchical, not as top down, like I always like to say, teachers don't get more votes. They're not super delegates. They have one vote, just like everybody else in the community. And when they start working out their problems in community with that in mind, and I can talk more about consensus decision making later, they just do better. And because I really believe that these subtle ways that we take power away from kids, sit down and be quiet, or, you know, cross your legs and crisscross applesauce, these are great tools that kids need this stuff. I don't disagree. But what if the kids came up with some of those directives, some of those guidelines, some of those solutions themselves? And what if when the kids came in from recess whining, so-and-so hurt me, pushed me down, and my knee is killing me, you would say to the child, okay, well, take so-and-so and go over and work it out at the peace table. You know, it's not going to get you additional attention from the teacher. Your problem is not her problem. It's your problem, and you can work it out. And if you need help, the whole community will be happy to work it out with you. So it's much more of a true consensus consent model rather than the most votes. And, you know, we really want to hear how the children feel.
Yeah, more collaborative. I like that idea of a peace table. Yeah.
And you can have one in your home too. It's a great thing to have in your home. You can just take like maybe a little fancy cloth and set it on a tiny little table out in a corner with a couple of little chairs or cushions. And it becomes a tradition. It becomes a habit that when we have a conflict, we go there, and it's a neat thing to do. It's cool. It's special, rather than it's no kind of punishment. A parent should never say, go to the peace table and breathe or be quiet. It's no. First, you have to stop and breathe. That is important. And it's important to then say, are you ready to work it out? For example, I had a conflict with someone recently, and it took me a couple days to be ready to work it out. You know, some people, it takes a year. You have to wait until you're ready to really talk about your feelings. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good experience in a conflict resolution setting.
Julie, have teachers used that idea of a peace table, and what have you gotten in terms of feedback for that?
Well, our first book, Rebecca Janke and I wrote a book in 1995, and it was called Peacemakers ABCs for Young Children, A Guide for Teaching Conflict Resolution with a Peace Table. Nice short title. And that book was purchased by 13,000 teachers. Most of them were Montessori teachers. And, you know, that was what that book was about, was creating the environment for peace and how to make a peace table in your classroom, how to use a talking piece, the story of Daganawida and the origin of the talking piece, those sorts of things. So we tried in that book, and I try to bring in some of those things in the parent and teacher guides at the end of the children's books. We try to make it really fun and interactive, so it gets away from the top-down learning process.
Well, speaking of peace, you have another book, don't you? I See Peace. Do you have that there? Can you want to read that one to us?
I would love to. Okay, so this book is called I Can See Peace, and it does have the same illustrator, but again, she's using the name Janine Johnny in this book. I can see peace. And this book is targeted for the same age group, ages 3 to 8. I can see peace. It's all around me. I can see peace in the birds and the trees. I can see peace in a warm, sunny day. I can see peace in the clouds far away. I can see peace in the dog and the horse. I see peace most when I'm happy, of course. I can see peace in a soft, gentle rain. I just said that wrong. I can find peace in a soft, gentle rain. Peace can be found again and again. You see, he's sailing all his different boats. I can find peace in a smile or a look. I can find peace on the page of a book. I can find peace in a smile or a look. Did I say that wrong? I'm sorry. Let me read that again. I can find peace in a smile or a look. I can find peace on the page of a book. It's interesting reading backwards. But peace can get interrupted, you see. By nature, by fights in my own family. But I have the power and the wisdom to seek the tools to solve things peacefully. I calm myself when I breathe in and out. Sometimes I can see peace all about. I can find peace in my own smile or grin, and then I see peace begins from within. With love in my heart and peace on my mind, I can find peace almost any time. I may struggle to find peace right now. But if I keep seeking, I'll find it somehow. What's cool about this book, sorry, that's the end. What I love about this is the artist brought in characters. It really doesn't have a plot or a storyline, but it warrants multiple readings because the children will say, oh, that's the same girl from page 4. And oh, that's the guy who was, and so everybody comes in here a couple of times, and that makes it kind of fun. And so again, it has a parent and educator guide with lots of activities. And one, for example, is the I Spy Something Peaceful game, which is similar to the other I Spy games you've played. And this one has a song as well. And that's I Can See Peace. Because
the song by the same title, Julie?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
No, the song is like Smile at Myself.
Smile at Myself.
I smile at myself. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I wonder, do you have an instrument nearby that you might want to play that song?
That one is a hard one for me to sing.
Oh, okay.
It's a terrible key for me. That a lot of times I put them in keys that are best for the kids, which of course is and of course you might have noticed I do not have that soprano voice, but I can give you. Look in the mirror, I see my own face. It's the reflection of every race. I know peace begins here, it begins within. To celebrate all life, I give me a grin. I smile, smile, smile at myself. Smile, smile, smile at myself. Smile, smile, smile at myself, and I watch my world change, etc.
Oh,
Anyway.
great. That's great. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so you talked about the guide materials in your books, and are there variations that teachers can use, things that they can do, like you talked about, I spy something peaceful, or I spy peace somewhere?
Yeah. So, for example, in the I Spy Something Peaceful game, each person
Okay.
is invited to take a turn. That's fun for the car, home, or classroom gatherings. One person looks around until he or she gets an idea and then says, I spy something peaceful. The others get to guess what that person is thinking about. After they guess or are told the answer, the speaker can explain why that item is peaceful to him or her. Most of us feel happier when we spy peace. So, and again, this book came after the conflict resolution book because we thought there were two critical elements that had to be laid down at this absorbent mind stage. One was learning how to solve your problems peacefully, learning how to listen to others and work things out. But if you're coming from a place of trauma, a place of such deep suffering, a place of fear, you first need to be able to even imagine peacefulness. And that's why we wrote the I Can See Peace book, because you saw in there how there's a girl, or it could be a boy, in a hospital bed who looks like cancer because she doesn't have any hair. And someone is reading to her a book, and that is a wonderful, peaceful thing. And, you can see on another page in the book where the girl has a wheelchair. Well, maybe she has not got the full use of her legs. Well, that's not the greatest thing in the world, but she's out there finding peace with a big smile on her face. And so we all have to come with the situation that we have. Every one of us brings our past day, our past days, our whole history to every day. And if we can take a moment to find peace and see it around us, it just helps.
I can see that game in a long road trip would be very, very, very helpful.
You'd probably be looking for a few other activities from the book as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about your Smart Tools for Life for a minute. Your website addresses, I had a look at it, and it addresses things like compassionate listening and conversations about race and negotiation and school violence, conflict resolution and bullying. Can you say more about your Smart Tools for Life and how that might be used and how maybe it's been used before? Maybe some stories about that?
Sure. Well, our nonprofit is called Growing Communities for Peace. And we've been around actually originally 1984, dating myself. That was when Rebecca started her Hudson Human Potential Institute, which morphed into Growing Communities for Peace in 1992. And then I took a little break from the nonprofit when my horse business was overwhelming for several years. And then I thought, well, I have a little bit of time now. I'm slowing down a little. I should be thinking about retiring. So it's a good time to get back into doing more with the peace work. And I thought, where I really want to go with this work is directly to the children and families. I don't want to run into the gatekeepers in education, because traditional education can be very prohibitive for new things, new ideas. Often, I mean, you can't even find the principal. I shouldn't say that. I mean, you can walk into a school, but like to email someone at a school is really hard. There's all this back and forth just to get past the gatekeepers. So to help people find our materials has, let me say this differently. So we realized that a better approach was to go directly to the parents, to the grandparents, to other caregivers, and then let them bring the materials to the classrooms. You know, the I Can See Peace book, this book was Peace Book of the Year in 2018, which is a pretty cool thing. It was an award given by the Indie Human Relations Book Awards. This book was a family gold medalist as a family book with the same organization. And then I'll talk a little bit later about the upcoming book, this one here, which also just got a family gold medal for, a gold medal from the Indie Human Relations Book Awards for school age children book. So when you're talking about our organization, you're talking about working with parents and teachers as our original work, and now working more from the bottom up, trying to bring materials directly to the kids. I think that I got interested in doing that particularly back to my son, because when he was little, I was struggling to find materials for him. I mean, obviously there's a lot of great books, you know, I'll Love You Forever. There's so many, I'm sure, on everybody's list, but the ones that I needed weren't there. And so those were the ones I wrote. So when I got back into this in 2016, I thought, I think I have to have a different name. And that's how Smart Tools for Life came about. I wanted to create tools for children that would serve them for their lives, that were smart, because it is smart to have compassion for others. It is smart to preserve the planet. It is smart to develop your social skills, because actually those are one of the most significant markers of success in business. You can't succeed if you can't get along. It doesn't matter how great your IQ is. Well, I'm sure for some particular jobs, you know, that's really the most important thing, but most jobs require some sort of social skills.
Yes, because no matter what you do in life, you're going to have to work with people. At least at times, you're going to have to work with people. The charter has done some, you know, is based on research too. And one of the things that came out of research is that we are actually hardwired for compassion. Mm-hmm. So it's in our DNA. So in order to be naughty or evil or bad or whatever, you have to go against your own inner nature to do that, which is fascinating to me. And I wish I had also known that as a child. You know, that you're actually hardwired for compassion. And if we just think about that for a moment, these are all tools that we can use to spread compassion in the world, which is what the charter's all about. Is our goal is to spread compassion on the planet. So I think we've got some people that have put some things in the chat room, and I'm going to check that. And then, Julie, would you like to take some questions?
Sure.
Okay, so one person wrote, I have the Barnyard Buddy Stop for Peace book and have read it to young elementary school-aged children and have had discussions with them. I also use it in smaller groups. Love the book and the message. Thank you, Julie. Can't wait until I get my hands on the Newcomers book. That's the one that just won an award, right?
Mm-hmm.
The principal approved getting the book. Hopefully we will order at the beginning of the school year. Okay,
Oh.
she has to go because she has a meeting online. And that, looking to see her name. Her name is Valerie Garcia. That was a note from Valerie. So if anyone has any questions for Julie, you can put your question in the chat box and we'll read that to her. So I'm curious too about, did the book, so the books grew out of experience, and did the experience then inspire the music? It seems like there's a progression here. Did that all come as a progression to you, or were there inspirations along the way? Or tell us how you got to making music.
Are you a musician, Barbara?
I was a musician when I was very young, but I'm a singer, and I've always said there's a difference between knowing music and playing it and having it come through you. There's a big difference. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's one reason why you're interested in the music too, because as a singer, you recognize that when you sing, it is it's just transformative. One of the things I like to do with my family if I ever get them at my house again, my mom and dad and my sisters, we have so much fun just sitting at the table and singing. And, you can't sing the part that somebody else sings. Everybody's got to have a unique part. And, that goes back traditionally in my mother's family particularly, but my father happened to be a wonderful musician. So I just lucked out that they were both into it, and we got to sing a lot in my family. So music, the poetry thing just kind of spits itself out. Sometimes things just have to be a poem. And then once they're a poem, they might as well be a song. So I have been writing songs since I was probably 16 when I started taking guitar lessons. And so my little bands over the years that I've been in did not play much original music, but you learn the foundation of musicality, and you learn simple folk tunes, and you learn that there's ways to make a tune hopeful, and there's ways to make a tune sad, and there's ways to make it memorable and hopefully have a good hook. And you try to put those things in when you create music as well as books. So think of the music as more like almost the refrain for the book. We recorded the music, a lot of it, way back when we did Peacemakers ABCs for young children. We recorded it with a group of young kids at the Friends School in Minneapolis. And of course, those young kids, let me see now, they would be like 50. It's been a while, but it was so much fun. They were so wonderful, and the experience of going into the studio and recording with them was great. And then when we changed the process from A, B, C, D, and E to S, T, O, P, well, we had to have some new music, which gave me an opportunity to go back in the studio again, which it turns out I absolutely love. And in my next life, maybe I'll come back as a real musician that just does music, because that would be fun.
Yeah, the thing about music is that it's transcendental. It takes you somewhere, and there's a warmth to it, and it's the universal language. There's just so much about that that's wonderful. So you were going to say?
Well, I was going to say, when you were talking about compassion and the charter, it made me think I really should tell just a brief little bit about two things I haven't mentioned.
Sure, please.
In the development of our work, we created something called conflict resolution cubes. You can see that picture from the video. And these cubes we call the scenario cubes, or that one is a scenario cube. And this is, of course, a feelings cube. Children, and often adults, do not know how to express their feelings. So when they get to the stage of the process, T, tell how you feel, it becomes kind of overwhelming. I don't know how I feel. I feel like you're a jerk. And so we teach, and there's a lot about this on my website. If you go to smarttoolsforlife.com and look at one of the blogs, you can find how to roll the cubes and say, I feel sad when somebody won't share. And it takes the you out of it. And it is clear. I mean, I would feel sad if anybody wouldn't share. It wouldn't just need to be this kid. It could be anybody who wouldn't share. And so that's what talking about your feelings really is. It's much more about you than it is about them. I mean, it's more about I than it is about you. And so we also have these other cubes, which are completely wonderful emotions, and why you might sometimes feel those emotions. And so there's a bunch of games that just teach kids to talk about how they feel, and that is a great tool for groups at schools, but would also be really fun for home, because another way to do it is just to throw the scenario cube and say, let me see now, that's when Sally played catch with me, or that's when Grandma and I went out to the ball court and did, played catch. Because it helps us understand what were the meaningful, wonderful moments in our children's lives. And as a teacher, when you're, for example, you might have a child who throws this cube and tells a story of what that is to him or her. And you might get sometimes a little more information than you bargained for, but that can be extremely important for those children, and for perhaps some referrals that are really essential. So then the other thing I wanted to say with regard to compassion, I was watching what was going on at the border, and especially in like 2016. And I'm not an immigrant. My family, of course, millions of years ago, well, 150 or so, came from Sweden, but I'm a privileged immigrant. So I couldn't write about immigration from a firsthand point of view, but I could write about belonging, and I could write about what it's like to be a newcomer, because everybody has that situation. And so this book, what we did with it is we made it a dog and a scenario such as the water is bad and we don't know what to do. We got to leave this town and we can't take Blue. And we can't take Blue. Well, what are we going to do with him? Of course, we looked around for everybody who might be able to have room in their home, but none of our friends could take Blue because they couldn't afford the water, or they were poor, they didn't have enough money for dog food. We didn't know what to do. The Humane Society was full, the animal shelter was full. So we dropped him off on the side of the road. All right, so now we have an abandoned dog. Now we have a forlorn child. Now we have a child who's been in 5 new classrooms this year. That's like Blue. These kids are so suffering nowadays. There's parents and relatives that are incarcerated. There's drug abuse. There's 2 home children where the teacher asks the child to make a card for Christmas or for the holidays for both households, and the child starts crying because she can't bring herself to make a card for the one household. I mean, the incredible suffering that goes on, children need to understand that they're not alone, that Blue the dog had that same feeling and he was rejected. And how it turns out in the end was that they begin to understand that even the farmer who rejected Blue in the beginning had loss and suffering. And that's one of the reasons he was such a jerk in the beginning. So that's the new book.
Well, that's wonderful. I like the cubes, and I like the idea of the new book. And Maslow's hierarchy tells us the most important thing is belonging. So that fits right in. That's great. Yeah. So I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I'm wondering, you said you had your instrument nearby, and I'm wondering if you would sing us out. But before I do that, before I have you do that, I'm just going to say that I believe that your products are also for sale on the Charter's marketplace. Am I right about that? You have things at the Charter?
I have not got the Barnyard Buddies Meet a Newcomer on that yet, I don't think.
Has that been released? The book's been released? Oh, yes. Okay. Okay.
It is available in print, and it should be available on Amazon now in print, and also on my website, Smart Tools for Life. But the Charter, I believe, just has the ebooks.
Okay.
And I will work on that, though, because the Charter does need to have those all.
Yeah, we can carry those for sure. Okay. Great. So I just want to say thank you, Julie, so much for coming and sharing your work, and to help us celebrate compassion, which is what we work toward at the Charter for Compassion. And if people want to go to your website, it's smarttoolsforlife.com. And if they want to go to the Charter, it's charterforcompassion.org. And if you enjoyed this and you want to support the Charter's work, you can go to the homepage and click on donate, and we'd be happy to have a one-time or ongoing donation. And also, if you want to know how many sectors, we have 12 sectors, and so people are there who are interested in the environment, in education, in healthcare, in women and girls, and so on. There's 12 different sectors, and if you look under the partner tab, you'll find a place where you can sign up to join one of those sectors if you'd like, if it calls to you. So I'm going to let you sing us off. How about that? Okay, well, great.
I showed you the CDs, and I thought maybe I would do a song from the CD Songs for Peace. And this song we wrote with the idea that when children identify themselves as peacemakers, they're more likely to be one. And so we encourage teachers, even in their classroom, you kind of wonder, let's see, what shall I call my students? I could call them friends, I could call them students, and you could also call them peacemakers. And so you name it and you are more likely to get it. So here we go. When we've got a problem, you know what we do. We can work it out, yes, we can work it through. When you see some sadness, you know what we give, a smile and a hug so that we all can live like we're peacemakers, peacemakers. We can do our part. Peacemaking, peacemaking's coming from the heart. We're peacemakers, peacemakers. We can do our part. Peacemaking, peacemaking's coming from the heart. Now when Mother Earth is suffering, you know what we do. Reduce, recycle, reuse, and care for animals too. When we see pollution, you know what we get. Take a bag, a pair of gloves, a shovel, and a rake. 'Cause we're peacemakers, peacemakers. We can do our part. Peacemaking, peacemaking's coming from the heart. We're peacemakers, peacemakers. We can do our part. Peacemaking, peacemaking's coming from the heart.
Oh, that's lovely, Julie. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for being here. Is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't, or something you want to add before we sign off?
I think you did a wonderful job. It was great fun to be here, and I feel really privileged that people are interested in my work, and very hopeful that people will be interested enough in creating compassion and empathy in the world to go out and do that good deed, to pass it along, to be the one who has something to give today.
Thank you. Well said. Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who came and joined us today. And again, Julie is at smarttoolsforlife.com, and the charter is at charterforcompassion.org. So thank you for coming. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks, Julie.